Okay, hi all. If you can, just let me know if you can hear the audio, and then we'll get going. Okay, happy days. How you, John? How you, Chris? How you, Reed? How you, Gilbert? Paul? Oh, how you, Paul? How you, Rob? How you, Dave? And how you, Paul again? How you, Joseph? Okay, right. Give me 1 second. I just have to reply to a text message. And then we get going. Someone just asked me about. I have to reply to him on WhatsApp, so I'm. Just give me 2 seconds. Always the way, last minute. Okay, right. How are you, Paul? How's it going? Right. The last webcast, what happened was a bit of an issue. Because Adobe updated their camera raw and programming stuff. I think it was February, and they hid where the camera raw defaults folder was, where you could normally save it. And I just want to show you where it is, so that anyone that was listening to the last webcast 2 days ago can just follow on, okay? And then we'll get on to the main thing of today's webcast, which would be creating an action, okay? So I'm just going to go to Bridge and just open up any raw image. Just click on Open. This will open it up inside, obviously, Camera Raw. If you're using Lightroom, the preferences for this would be in a different location, and I'd have to check it because I don't use Lightroom. But from the Camera Raw dialog box, if you create a preference that you like, basically, in order to save that camera raw as a default for your back. So say you had a Canon, you could have a Canon 7D and you could have a Canon 5DX Mark II or something. You could save the presets so that they match closer together, or you could have a Nikon and a Canon and save color presets and stuff like that, and then be able to auto match them as they're coming in. And the place to save and find them is that little dialog box there on the top. It's the fourth one in from the right. If you click on it, it comes up with a camera raw defaults dialog box, which is the new place where they have it. And once you have a preset set up with your custom colors and whatever you want, you just go in and use defaults specific to camera back model, and it knows that it's a Panasonic GH4, and then you can create a default from there. And that's one of the defaults there. So if I create a default, now I have a default for my GH4, and I also have a default for my S1. Okay, I can go through that again at a later date, but basically that's where you would go in, and your camera raw would then automatically change your raw files even before you see them. Open them up, they would automatically have a preference of whatever you set up in the dialog boxes. Okay, hi Mary. Audio still good there, yeah? So basically, to get onto this, it's about actions. Um, Actions, they are such a powerful tool inside of Photoshop, and what we're doing today is it's a pretty basic action, but it just will save you such a long amount of time. Today we're going to be doing an action for creating a custom watermark. Okay, so you could also make an action an even simpler one. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to make it a really, really, really simple action. Okay, so actions basically, if I open up this raw file, they record what you do inside of Photoshop. It's kind of like your skybox. When you press record in the skybox, it records whatever's on the channel. Okay, so I'm just going to open up that image. So I have an image open inside of Photoshop now. Okay, so this is what it would look like. Your layers palettes there, and that's all you need. Okay, so your actions palette. In order to create an action, you need to find the actions palette. Okay, if you can't, if you don't have it already open, if you go to Window and down to Actions, it's right there. It's Alt or Option on a Mac and F9, and it will open up the actions palette. It looks like a little play icon. Okay, now I already have a signature action made in here, but we're going to make a new one really, really quickly, and then we'll go through the signature one. Okay, this is just to show you how it works and how quick it is. So with the actions palette open, there are two options inside the actions palette. If you click that little flyout menu, you'll see this button mode option. That turns the actions into, like, all you have to do is click a button and the signature is done, you know, or all you have to do is click a button and it processes your files. So if you want to make a new action, you see you have no access to the actions palette down there, to the play, stop and records. You have to go back up to the top corner of the palette, left click and say button mode. Okay, and when you say button mode, then you have access to new folder icon and the new actions icon. So if we create a new set, a group set, and we just call it test, okay, and inside that then we create a new action. Just create an action, and we'll call this action example. Okay, because that's all it is. Now you can see the red record button is recording, right? That means now whatever I do inside of Photoshop, it will record it. It won't, however, record a brush stroke or something like that, but what it will do is it'll record menu items and adding new layers and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to do a very, very simple action. So I'm going to actually duplicate the layer. So I'm going to go layer, new, layer via copy. I now have two layers and it's recorded the command layer via copy. Okay, now I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to call it layer, new, layer. I'm going to call that blank, and it's recorded that. And now I'm going to press stop, and that's your action made. So if I delete those two layers by clicking on them and just dragging them down to the trash, I now have my image again as it was at the start. And if I want to play the action, I have two choices. I can just click back up on example there and click the play button and it's done. Or I can select the two of them again, dump them. I can go back to the button mode here and just click example there. And that's your action. Okay, that is literally one of the very, one of the very, very simplest action type things you can do. Okay, and what we'll do today is a little bit more complicated, but whether it's adding just a new layer, whether it's adding a layer with contrast on it and maybe a layer to turn the image black and white, these actions can be made into incredibly powerful tools by turning them into batch actions and also turning into what's called droplets, where you can just drag 600-700 images onto a droplet, go off, have your dinner, you know, go to work, whatever, come back, and your images are done. You don't have to touch them. Okay. Any questions on that before we move on? I'm just going to write that in here. Right. And basically what they are is an action that helps you be completely autonomous with what you're doing. You don't have to be sitting in front of the computer to process your images. You can actually be out taking more images, making more money, enjoying yourself, and not have to sit in front of the computer all day. Okay? Right. So there's no questions there. Okay. Now, um, so what we're going to do is we're going to delete this action because we don't need it. So in order to delete the action, we're in button mode at the minute because they're all buttons basically. So left click on that icon, which is the flyout menu, and select button mode. It turns it into the list menu. So then we can just grab the test one, left click, and drag it down to the trash can inside the actions palette, okay? And that'll get rid of. You don't have to try and make a big action. How you, Paul? Yes, you can. He just asked, can you press stop at any time? So if you were making an action that was like 200 commands long, you can at some point press stop in the middle of it and then come back to it later on and record from where you left off. So you don't have to do 150 command action into one go, but you just have to be very, very careful where you stop and then where you go back and press record again. It has to be in exactly the same space, and you have to be on the same at the same part of the action, because it normally goes back to the top. So you have to select the bottom part of the action, the last thing you did, and then record on from there. Okay, so yes, you can do it in multiple steps, but it depends on what you want to try and do. Sometimes you're better off making little applets inside. So the first part of the action will do one thing, the second part will do another thing, the third part does another thing, and then you just make an action that plays the first one, then the second, then the third one. And that action then is you don't have to sit there doing that action. You've already made the 3 or 4 of them. You know what I mean? So no, that's no problem. So I'm just going through stuff that I had to take off here. Simple actions, actions palette, load, save. So we can load actions into the actions palette and we can save them. Okay, I'm going to go through this first before we actually make the action. So that signature action that's there, I can save that now. And go to the flyout menu and click Save Actions. Actions can't be done in Lightroom, John. As far as I'm aware, okay, I could be completely wrong on that, but Lightroom doesn't have actions. They have presets and stuff like that, which Camera Raw also does, but actions can't be ran inside of Lightroom. You have to use Photoshop to run an action. It's kind of like it's specific to Photoshop, okay? So I can save an action here. So I just click on the flyout menu and choose Save Actions. Then it comes up with a dialog box. Where do you want to put the action? And all you do then is tell it where you want to save it. I'm going to save it inside of this particular folder. Call it Signature. Click Save. And it's saved. So if I wanted to delete that now, I can right click. I can just drag it down to the trash can. And it's gone. So now I need to load my action and click Load Action. Go to where I saved it, click on Signature, click Load, and now my action's back in here. Okay? So I have 2 actions inside this. We're going to go through making both of them. We'll do one first, then the other one. And basically the action's going to do a couple of things. And this is where it gets not more complicated, but you have to be very, very careful on how you structure the action and exactly what you do, because if you want to try and make this into a batch action and be able to do it without being in front of the computer the whole time, there are certain things you have to do. It's kind of like when you get into your car, you have to put your seatbelt on, you have to check your mirrors, you have to do a few things, you have to make sure your handbrake and all the rest of it. You just can't start driving before you do these things beforehand. So it's kind of like that with Photoshop with actions. Actions are okay if you just wanted to press it once. Sometimes it's okay, but if you want to make it into a batch action, there are certain things you have to do and have to be aware of that will cause it to grind to an absolute halt, and you be kind of scratching your head saying, well, what happened here? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the few things you have to take into consideration. All right, the first one is this. I'm just going to close that for a minute. Everyone wants to be able to batch process their images, okay? So my image is there. I have a few images, okay? that I wanted, and I picked them specifically because of this. I've RAW images and I've JPEG images, and this is critical. Your RAW images will come in from camera raw at 300 dots per inch, okay, if you have set it up as follows. So I'm going to right click and say open this raw file, and you just have to make sure when it opens into camera raw that if you click on that bottom bar down there, okay, it gives you an option. The resolution might be set to 240. Just set it to 300 dots per inch. Okay, I have gone into it in the first webcast a couple of the middle of last week, the first test one. And I have gone into why it's 300 and not 240, but just set it to 300, okay? And when you set it on 300 and bring it in as 16-bit, because 16-bit gives you more leeway and more bit depth in the image, and I went into that as well in the first webcast. And click OK. And I also went into why it's sRGB and not one of these godforsaken Pro Photo RGB or Adobe RGB, and that's another story, but I've gone through that as well. So make sure it's 300 and it's pixels per inch, okay, not pixels per centimeter. So 300 pixels per inch, okay, and just click OK and then open the image. So I've already opened this one, okay. So that's how you would make sure that when your images are being brought into Photoshop that they come in at 300 dots per inch. That's crucial, okay. Now JPEGs are a different story. JPEGs off your camera, depending on which camera you have, that's a JPEG, okay. That's a JPEG directly off a camera of a setup, and that's another JPEG. If I was to open up that particular file there, it's one of the workshops I did recently, I was teaching it. If I open that up, you'll see that it's going to come in, but it's not going to come in at 300 dots per inch. If you can just about see, I'll just get rid of me there for a second. Just right there on my arrow is my mouse. It's actually 180 dots per inch. It's not 300, okay? And it's really important that that has to be 300 dots per inch, because if you're trying to put a signature into as in your signature on your pictures, if there are different resolutions to start with, the signature is going to be a different size in each picture, and it's going to look really, really bad. It's bad enough that we have to deal with landscape pictures and portrait pictures, but we need to make sure that we're dealing with the exact resolution that we need and the exact pixel size that we need, okay. So I'm going to go through that now in a second. So any questions on that? I'm just going to keep pasting that, any questions on that into the text there, because some people read the comments, okay. So what we need to do then is change and make sure that the images, the JPEGs, are 300 dots per inch, not 180. Some cameras, they bring the images in, the JPEGs come in by default at 72 dots per inch. My old GH4 was 72 dots per inch, so was my GH5. My S1 is now 180. It's just the way they get defaultly brought in and saved on the card. You just have to make sure in the action there's a bit in there that converts it to 300, and we will be doing that, okay? So that's the one of the most important things, is make sure that your resolution on your file is the same for every file. There might be different pixels, like there's some pictures here that are, that pixel dimension there is 3,500 by 4,600. That is 4.6 by 3.5, about the same. That's 4,000 by 6,000 pixels. That one is 4,000 by 4,000. I made a square one just to do an Instagram-y kind of one. Same with that. That's 4,000 by 4,000. That there is a stitch, and it's actually 7,300 by 5,000. So they're all different resolutions as regards to pixel dimensions, and they're all square, portrait, landscape, you know. So your job when you're making an action like this is you have to make sure that the action works on every single image that you throw at it. Because if it doesn't, then you can't make a batch action out of it, and you can't trust it to work when you're not at the computer, okay? And this works on Macs and PCs. It's exactly the same principle, okay? So Actions that open. Yeah. Another point being an action, right? When you're creating an action that's going to be used in a batch and it's going to be able to save it into a folder and stuff like that, and it's going to take another file, which is your signature file, and be able to open that and place it, you need to make sure that the place where the signature file is a known place, and the place where you save it is a known place, and that it never changes. So I always kind of tell people that if they only have one hard drive, say your C drive, make a folder and call it workflow. Okay. So if you were to look at my computer there, on my C drive, I have a folder called workflow on my C drive. Okay. And inside that, then I have my workflow. Whatever I need to do, I process PSDs, I have the signature stuff, I have my actions and whatever, and I have a folder called Watermark. And inside that folder, I put the watermark that I created. And then your action is told, go open that watermark image from that watermark folder, do something with it, and when you're finished with the action, go save it in a folder called Facebook Signatures. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be resizing the image so that it works on Facebook and it works on Instagram and it works on a few other kind of platforms like that, online platforms. There's absolutely no point most of the time in uploading like a 50 megabyte file to Facebook. It doesn't float, like it just doesn't work. It will work, it's a complete waste of bandwidth and they'll end up shrinking it down anyway. And I'd rather get the image the way I want it first before you send it up to Facebook or any other place. And that's why you should always have the sRGB color profile when you're uploading to Facebook or any online image sharing platform, basically. Or basically 90% of the time it's always sRGB. If you have your own printer, as I was saying in one of the first webcasts, if you have your own printer, you can have the option of doing sRGB because you're going straight from your printer, from your PC to your printer. You just go file, print, happy days. But if you're uploading that image to Facebook, as I showed in an earlier webcast, all hell breaks loose and you just lose image quality, you lose your contrast, you lose the color, everything gets smudgy and all. I'll go through that again in a couple of weeks, but I have covered it before. So that's why you should always be using sRGB as a color space. So having said that, so your action, it needs to be able to open. To be a batch action, it needs to be able to open files from a specific folder. It needs to be able to save the finished files in a specific folder. Okay, it's kind of like one of them computerized machines that put cars together. If you suddenly move one tray of bolts or whatever from one place to another, the machine doesn't know it's gone and it'll just grind to a halt. Okay, same thing. If you rename that folder that's in the action, that was the signature folder, if you rename it to something else, it can't find it and it will just stop. Okay, so having said that, the next thing we need to do then is we need to make sure that all our images, Facebook recently, the last couple of years, they kind of prefer an image dimension in pixels of 2048 by 2048. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going inside the action, we're going to make the image fit inside an imaginary box of 2048 by 2048. So if it's a portrait image, it'll go 2048 high, and if it's a landscape image, it'll be 2048 wide. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing for the first part of it. All right. Let me see. Yeah, and there's also another thing we need to add in. I'll go through it now as we add it in because I'm going to want to start this. But as I start this, there's going to be a lot of points where I'm going to tell you that this is where it could go wrong. So basically be careful because there are certain things that I've learned about 24 years now at this stage, about 18 years teaching this stuff. There's certain things that I've learned that will actually ruin your day with actions because they're not that you just need to know how they work basically. So the first thing is we just bring one image in because you have to figure out first how big do you need your signature to be. That's the first thing you need to figure out. Before you do anything else, you need to figure out how big your signature wants to be, because with me it might be LT photo, or so, I'll just name it my name, Lawrence Timmins, right? But with you, it could be JP Photography. It could be Brian Smith Photography. It could be a big long signature. It could be a tall signature. It could be a signature that has a little diagram logo on the middle of it, a camera or something like that. Everyone's signature is going to be different. We're going to be just creating a text one for the minute, because once you create the signature, or once you pay someone to create the signature, they'll give you a transparent file anyway that you can use this method of making an action to batch process all your images. Okay. So everyone, the audio still okay? Yeah, we're all still here. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up this one image, okay? Because we need to find out how big we need to make the signature. I know for myself exactly how big the signature needs to be for me, but just for that's grand. Thanks, Dave. So I don't care about processing this image whatsoever. I just want to open it. So I'm just going to open it. And right, and we'll have another image as well. So now we need to just get a landscape image. So we have a landscape image and a portrait image in the aspect of a landscape and the aspect of a portrait. So now we can figure out how big we need to make the actual size of the file that's going to be the signature. God, I'm lost for words tonight, which is a first for me. Thanks, Paul. Right, so first thing we need to do is we need to resize the image to 2048 by 2048, okay? This is just before we even go making the action. And I'm going to show you how it's done. So, File, Automate, Fit Image. 2048 wide, 2048 high. And click OK. And the same with this one. Click on this image and go the same. File, Automate, Fit Image. 2048 by 2048. Okay, so now instead of this portrait being 6,000 pixels high by 4,000, it's only 2048 high by 1536 wide. Okay, and the portrait or the landscape over here is now 2048 wide by 1536. Okay, so they all at the longest edge is 2048. All right, so our I'm just going to open up the yeah, I'm just going to open up the signature file just to show you what it is, and I'll show you how to create it as well. So that's my signature file there. I did it for JP Photography, and I put a copyright symbol in there, okay? And that is 560 pixels wide by 150 pixels high, okay? So now I kind of, I'm looking at it and how did I come up with this? All right. And basically what I did was I got the type tool, typed JP Photography onto the image in a font that I liked, resized it and said, okay, that's the size I need. And then I just made a file and I used, what was the text? It was Rage Italic, LET, okay? It's down to yourself, whatever font you like. But basically, what will happen is the image is going to take that file and dump it onto this one. All right, and I'll just show you how it does it. Okay, that's what the action's going to do. All right, and it's as simple as that. And I kind of came up with that. If you divide the width of the thing by 4, that it's kind of, it works, and it works on that as well over there as well. It's a happy medium for portrait and for landscapes. It just does, it just works, and it works on square images. You know what I mean? So any questions now? I just wanted to show you that that's where it came from, and basically I'll show you how I made the actual signature as well. All right. So we're going to get on with this. So the signature file itself. So basically I came in there into this image after I resized it to 2048 by 2048. I did that first. Then I got the marquee tool, which is the second tool down in the tools palette, or hit M on the keyboard. And I kind of dragged it, hang on, normal. Make sure it says normal in the top here. Whenever you select the tool down the left hand side, context sensitive tool options come up across the top of Photoshop. Okay, so when you select marquee tool, make sure the style is normal, that it's not fixed ratio or fixed size. Okay, for the minute, just make sure it's normal. And then you just left click and draw a kind of a rectangle. And if you can imagine that imaginary rectangle is going to be a representation of where the signature is going to be in the image, then it gives you an idea of, okay, if it's in that size, then all I have to do is measure the rectangle, and I know roughly what size in pixels I need to make my image of for my signature. All right. So to find that out, you go to Window, Info, which is F8, and it pops up the info palette. Okay. And it's telling me that it's 567 by 153, and that's pixels. So I kind of rounded it off and I made it 560 by 150. That's for me. And the beautiful thing about this is it's roughly 150 high, but it depends on if your signature is JP photo. It's going to be smaller. It's not going to be 560 wide. It might only be 300 wide. So get a text. So what you do is this, right? We'll do it on this one. So on this image here, we're going to just draw the font. You see, it's more, there's a heck of a lot more involved in this than just making the action. I have to show you how to make your own watermark with text, and then what size to make it. And if you understand why you made it and what size you make it, then you can make your own one and understand it has to be this size to work, and then everything's hunky-dory. I'm not the kind of person that just gives you a thing and says, okay, you go do it. I'll explain why it has to be this way and then this way, and you get that result. I don't kind of take the easy way. I explain it as I go, okay? So the text tool inside of Photoshop, on the tools palette, it's basically the big T for text. Okay, and when you click on it, you'll get a dialog box. You get not dialog box. You get context sensitive options across the top for text. So I'm just going to click anywhere at all in the picture, and it Photoshop by default. If I click on the layers inside the layers here, if you can't see the layers palette, go up to Window and click Layers, or hit F7 on the keyboard. If you click on the text layer, the T layer, it just puts in this blank stuff. It's auto generated text. So if I wanted the name to be JP photography, okay, and the color is up here, you can click on the color and you can change it. I'm just going to keep it white, but if you wanted, you could just drag it down in the color picker to black. You could have an insane red if you wanted to. You could do whatever you wanted. I kind of just like a nice white because it's easy enough to make it black. So drag it to the top left hand corner and it's white, and click OK. Now we need to get it to move down to the bottom corner. So for the minute, because we only want to find out how big do we want the actual text to be, just get the move tool in the top left, click on the text and drag it down. Now if it won't drag for you, make sure that auto select layer is selected up here. You have to make sure auto select layer and not group, okay? And make sure that it is actually checked as well, because if it's not checked, it won't select it when you click on it. It'll just select whatever layer is here. So auto select layer. So now obviously that's way too big because it's taking up half the picture. Okay, so we're going to change the font to Rage Italic because it's the one that I kind of liked. Now I have billions of fonts on this machine, but just for everyone's sake, I think Rage Italic is on most machines. So to change the font, because we've clicked on a few things now, we've lost the ability to change the font. So we go back up to the text layer, double click on the text layer, and now we have the font tools back across the top. We also have them down the side here. That A option there, that's your fonts. Okay, if you can't see it, go window and choose character. Okay, don't look for a font one, it's not there, it's character. So if you click on character, it shows you here. Okay, so I'm going to just use the one across the top. So double click here, and then if you, where it says Arial, Arial is a type of font. If you basically, for me, if you type in where we Rage, it'll come up Rage Italic, and it's LET is the one I want. LET plain. The letter one, the regular, is slightly wider. I want the one that's slightly more joinedy uppy. It's like it's joined up writing basically. So letter. And I also know that I want 16 point, 16 pt. So that's the size there. You choose. You can make the size bigger or smaller. Okay. If you just type in 16, that's the size I want. All right. And then if I click on the layer again, and I can just drag it to there, and I'm pretty happy with that now, because if in my head I know my image is 2048 pixels wide, so that size of font is going to be exactly the same in every single image that I work on, whether it's a portrait image or a landscape image. Okay, and I'll just show you that. Here's the other image in the background. Get rid of the layer we have by just dragging it to the trash inside of the layers palette. And then that crawling ants marquee tool, you can deselect that by Command D or Control D on a Mac, or you can go, because it's a selection, it's under the select menu, and then select deselect. Okay, so some people like Photoshop in tabs. I absolutely detest it. And if your tabs are opening up like this, it makes it a lot harder to do what I'm about to do. Okay, some people love this thing. It drives me insane. So if you want to make your life easier, if you just click on the name and just drag it down a little bit, and it dislodges it. Click on the name, drag it down. Click on the name and drag it down. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to click on the landscape, and I'm going to get this text here and just drag it onto the portrait. So just left click on it, drag it across, and drop it. Okay, and as you can see there, if I was to, that's, where is that? That's 33% there, yeah. So I have reset Photoshop. Now, so at 33% zoom, both of those work quite well. Okay, so I now know my size of my font that I want to use. It's Rage Italic and it's size 16. Okay, and that's where I came up with the size for the other yoke. So knowing that it's that size there, click on one of the images, get the marquee tool, left click and drag it, a rectangular box around the outside of it with a bit of space around it, and then just check how wide it is and how high it is by going window and looking at info, and it tells me 465 by 135. Now I know for mine it's 560 by 150. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to make an actual file and put our watermark in it. All right, any questions on that so far? Because it is quite a long, I could have just said, oh, I made a watermark file and tough luck, here's how to use it, but I wanted to show you how you can actually create your own, so I had to go through an awful lot more stuff. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is I'm going to close that one down now. We know our size of font because we wrote it down on a piece of paper. So we need to make a new document, okay? And to make a new document, it's simple enough. Good man, David. That's it. If anyone like, there is a lot to cover, but don't forget you can always look back on this and go through it in sections. And if there's anything that kind of, hopefully I won't miss anything or explain anything. But sometimes Photoshop can just grind to a halt, and you can't select what should be able to be selected. Just have a look around, have a look and see if there's an option that should be selected. It's one of these things that it takes years of practice, but that's why I'm trying to go through it on such a finite detail where hopefully anything that you might trip up on, I'll point it out first so that you won't trip up on it. Or if you see it happening, you'll remember, oh, this is what happens here. I'll just undo this and it's fine. So, yeah, that's brilliant. So now we need to make a new document, okay? So File, New. Now, Photoshop's new version has a new convoluted document thing. I'll go back and I'll reset it maybe later and show you again. But basically, inside the new document, actually I'll do it now because it won't be fair if I don't. So I've got Preferences and General. And right now, hopefully this. Right, this is like, oh God, Photoshop. Look at how convoluted this thing is. Okay. Anyway, this is what we want. So for me, the width of my new document, I need it to be 560, and it has to be pixels. Okay. And the height, I want 150. And I want it to be a landscape. So that's kind of handy there, the orientation, okay? Because I don't want it to be this skinny and really high, because your signature is lengthways, okay? So it has to go into a landscape. And the resolution here, which is really critical, has to be 300 pixels per inch, okay? Pixels per inch, 300. RGB is fine. 8-bit, that's okay. And the background content's transparent. That's really important as well. Sometimes when you create a new document, it fills with white. A lot of the times it fills with white actually, but it has to be transparent, okay? And the reason we need it transparent is this. Hang on one second. How are you, Joe? Yeah, I always do that, Joe. One of the members there, he just basically pointed out the fact that that tab thing drives him nuts. It drives me nuts all the time, and I never have it as I basically. I'll show you how to get rid of it in a second. So this is what we want: a new document, 560 pixels wide by 150 high, because that's what I zoned in on for the actual logo that I wanted. You might be 500, you might be 700, depending on how long your name is, okay? And transparent. And if you click create, you'll get this document that's 560 pixels by 150 pixels. Rob, hang on one second. Are you using that weird interface or the old one? CC 2018. Okay, I'm going to go back to an older interface that's probably going to make more sense to Rob. That's not weird. First, I'm going to show you how to get rid of that tabs thing. If you're on a PC, to get into preferences in Photoshop, it's edit and all the way down to preferences at the bottom. Okay, it's Control K on a PC or Command K on a Mac. On a Mac, you'll go to the Photoshop text in the corner, and it's the third or fourth one down. So on a PC, it's Command K, or sorry, Control K. On a Mac, it's Command K. So Preferences and General, and this comes up with a general. I went through this in the first episode a couple of days back. So use Legacy New Document Interface. That's what I always choose, and that's probably going to fix what's going on with yours now in a second, Rob. Okay, and on the workspace here, open document as tabs, I have that unchecked. Now by default it's checked, and every time you open an image it's in that tabbed thing. It's like an Excel spreadsheet, they're all tabbed across the top or whatever, and it drives me insane. So I always uncheck it because I want a floating window, okay? But that's where you go. Now in older versions of Photoshop, that open documents as tabs could be in the very first tab, but it's within the first two or three. So if you just go have a look around, you'll find it, and just make sure that it's not checked. And I've put my legacy document open back to this. So if I go and make a new document now, the background contents, Rob, of your new, you should, when you click on that, there should be white, black, and there should be a transparent option. Now if there isn't, I'm going to show you how to make it transparent, okay? We'll just do it right now, okay? Oh, it's working. Ah, that's good, man. Ah, that's it. Yeah, it's just you have to click on the drop down. It usually only shows you three options, but basically there's two or three more underneath it. You just have to click it. So just make sure it's transparent. So in the old dialog box, if you don't have the latest and greatest CC, it's 560 pixels wide, like before, 150 pixels high, 300 pixels per inch, and then it's transparent. And if I click OK, I have exactly the same thing. Okay, it's exactly the same file. So I can close that one. So now what we need to do is we get our text tool, T for text, hit T on the keyboard, and the text tool is selected. Click in the middle, it comes up. If we click in, you can barely see it there, right? So here's something that I always do. I just add a new layer by clicking up here, layer, new layer, just for a minute. And we need to bring that layer down underneath the other one. So just drag it down, left click and drag it down till it's under the other one. Now we need to fill that with a color. So I'm going to choose some insipid, like really heavy color, okay? And I'll show you why in a second we need it. So edit, fill, and it comes up with a dialog box. You can have background, foreground, color, black, white. Just choose color and choose like purple or something. I would actually choose a deep blue, okay? And then click OK. What happens now is you have at least got color in the background and you can see your actual logo, okay? Which is really important. So instead of having this Laura Lipscomb text that auto gets put in, we're going to double click and we're just going to type in the name of the photographer. So say it's JP Photography, okay? Now we need to move it across, okay? So if we click the move tool, there's a million ways of doing this, but just click the move tool and just move it across, okay? Now I want to put a little copyright symbol in here, okay? So I kind of it's handy to have it, okay? Now yet again, until last couple of months ago, it was very simple to put in a copyright symbol. There used to be in this bottom corner here, there's custom shape tool. You could click that and you could just choose the shapes from here, and you could add in shapes and stuff like that. But for the life of me, Photoshop are always changing things, and they kind of mess up how easy it is, and then they call it a feature, right? So we're going to go about it a slightly different way. To put in a copyright symbol, you do this, okay? So our JP photography is there. We need to select the text tool again, so hit T on the keyboard, and if we click just to the left hand side of it, and that's our Laurie Lipscomb, right? That's our auto font that gets made by default by Photoshop now. Now there's a little tip. If you don't have a program like Microsoft Word where you can just insert a copyright symbol and then copy and paste it, there's shortcut keys, and I wrote these down because they're really hard. Option G on a Mac gives you the copyright symbol. I don't know why it does, it just does. I googled it. Now on a PC, if you hold down Alt and type this in, 0169. So Alt 0169, and let go of the Alt key, and it gives you the copyright symbol, right? Now it doesn't look like the copyright symbol at the minute, it looks like a square box, because the copyright symbol isn't built into the font family of Rage Italic. So we have to change the font to some other font where it will work, okay? So to do that, it's simple enough. At the minute, the I-beam is at the end of the font. If you just click on the layer, the top layer we made there, and then we just go up to the list of fonts, and say for argument's sake we just choose Arial, as I said we had loads of them. See, now we have our copyright symbol. Alright, so what we need to do now is figure out, do we need to make it bigger or smaller? I think we need to make it bigger, fair enough. Go into the font size at the top here and go from say 16 to 30. Okay, now we need to move it down. So there's a couple of different ways we can do that. You can get the move tool and just click on it and drag it. That's probably the easiest way, because we're not really talking about interfaces here, we're actually talking about making an action, okay? So get the font tool, or sorry, get the move tool to the very, very top, which is V on the keyboard, and make sure that auto select layer is selected. Click on the layer itself, the C, and just drag it down and bring it across a little bit. And once you've done that, if you hit the down arrow key, you can move it down a little bit more and move it across a bit more. So the arrow keys can fine tune where you want the actual the actual layer to go, okay? So, and the JP photography, we need to move that down a smidge. So click on JP photography inside the layers palette, and it needs to move down. So I'm going to hit the down key 3 or 4 times, because once you have the move tool selected in the tools palette, which is the V key, so you hit V and it gets that move tool, which is the very top one, that's selected, right? Then our up and down and left and right enable us to move across and up and down and left and right. So I'm happy enough with that now, as maybe the C is a bit too bold. So go back up to the copyright layer, click on it, and if we double click the text tool, see that, not the text tool, but double click the actual icon itself. I'm just going to make these bigger for a minute here, 1 second. Yeah, double click the text tool, it selects it, and then we can go back up here and click on Arial and maybe make it, oh no, it is, yeah, Arial regular. Then we can go narrow. No, I don't like that, so we go back to regular. So I'm happy enough with what it was. So if you're in the middle of doing something and you don't like it, you can always press escape. So hit escape on the keyboard and it just dumps what you were about to do, okay? So any questions on that so far? Copy. So God almighty, we're only right. So now what we need to do is this. There's a very, very, very important thing that has to be done here, right? And if we were to turn off that background layer and use that as the signature, okay, it may seem like it would be okay, but because of the way the action works, when it aligns the layers to the bottom and over to the right hand side, it will be too far into the corner, okay? And I'll show you what it's going to do if you don't do this first. So I'm going to dump this layer by left clicking on it. I'm back over this picture now. I want to just get rid of that for a minute. I'm going to dump it. Now back over to this picture, which is the signature one. Click on the top layer, hold down shift, click on the next layer. That's 2 layers selected, okay? Left click and drag them over. And what can happen is this. When the action aligns them, it'll end up doing this. It gets the font right next to it there, to the edge, and it will go right down to the bottom. Okay? And I've seen that an awful lot on people who are trying to do this. That's the way it will align, which is wrong. And then it's so much harder for the action to understand moving it back a little bit. But if you do this little tip I'm going to show you when you're making your own watermark, it will work perfect. Okay? So we can dump those 2 layers in there. Now we don't need them. We go back to our, this is our signature, okay? And turn back on the background layer. Okay, so what we actually need to do is put one little pixel of data in the bottom left, bottom right, and the top left and top right, because sometimes people like to sign, move it into the top left or the top right. So if we just put a little pixel of data in the four corners and make it at 1% opacity, then the action will see it and it will bring it in and it will center it exactly where we want it, okay? So what we're going to do is this. Click on the background layer, the bottom layer, which is layer 1, and make a new layer. You can click on that new layer icon down there, makes a new layer, okay? And all we're going to do on this, I'm just going to minimize that for a minute. I'm going to bring that up there, and when you see the little blue line, and let go, it puts it into a tab, okay? Which is handy for this, because all we want to do is zoom in really, really, really close. Click on the zoom tool or hit Z on the keyboard, and then move down to the bottom right hand corner over here and just click, and then move down again, click, 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 click until it can't go any closer, okay? The zoom ratio we're at the minute is absolutely insane. It is 12,800%, okay? You can see it there in the bottom corner. Sorry, you can just see it there. It's 12,800% zoom. So, what we need to do now is we need to get a 1 pixel square and fill it with white. That's all we need to do. So, we get our marquee tool, which is right there. So, M for marquee, or click on the square there. If that happens to be an ellipse, so if you left click anywhere you see a little chevron in the bottom corner of the tools palette, means that when you left click and hold the mouse, you get multiple options. So if you happen to have an elliptical tool there, a circle, or if your one left click and hold says single horizontal or single vertical line, to get it to be a marquee, you just left click on it, hold it, and hover over the rectangular marquee tool, and it's back to a marquee. Now here's the thing, we need to have a 1 pixel by 1 pixel. So this is where we change how this tool works, okay? We need to go to the style and click fixed size. And in the width, type in 1 space px. So 1 space px. And in the height, we need 1 space px, okay? So what that's going to do is it's going to give us a pixel. When I click over here, just outside of the document, it's going to marquee that 1 by 1 square pixel. I want to fill that with white. So edit, fill, and just sit where it says contents for color, just choose white and click OK. Alright, now I'm going to zoom it back out. The quickest way to zoom it back out would be to double click, say, the zoom tool, and gets us back to 100%. And then if we zoom back in on the far side again, just left click over this side and drag the slide bar across the bottom until we get to this corner. Let me move the hand tool. Anytime you've got a zoom tool selected and you hit the space bar, it turns to the hand tool, which is very handy for left clicking and dragging something. And then when you let go of the space bar, you get your zoom tool again. So now we need the marquee tool, which is M for the marquee tool. And because it remembered the last thing, all we have to do is click in the bottom left here outside of the actual document, and we have another marquee. We fill that, edit, fill, white, again, done. Double click the zoom tool to zoom back out, and click in the top corner to zoom in. Marquee tool, click outside, edit, fill, white, done. Double click the zoom tool again, then because we're on plus, if it's on minus up here, you can just go up and click on plus. It's the quickest way of doing it. There's loads of keyboard shortcuts, but I want to keep this as less of a head wreck as possible, because I know we're going on a good bit now. So click again, and always on the outside over here, and then M for marquee tool. Click. You've got your marquee. Edit, fill, and with white. Okay. So here's the trick, right? We deselect now, so go select, deselect. Now that layer there, layer 2. If we switch the visibility on and off, it hides the 4 of them. So if I zoom it out a little bit, you can probably still see there. You might still be able to see the 4 white dots. So if I turn them on and off, that's off now and back on. Okay, so there's off and back on. So what we need to do with this layer is change the opacity to 1%. So just highlight it and just type in 1, and that's it. Okay, they're still there. You can't see it because it's only 1%. I can zoom up on that, and you wouldn't be able to tell that there's a 1% white pixel there and it's not there. So it's not going to interfere with the picture you're putting it on. Okay, so the last thing we need to do then to have the signature correct and ready for working with the action, which is coming up, is all we have to do is turn off the blue layer. We just dump it, so we can just drag it. You can keep it switched on if you want, but just drag the blue layer to the trash can inside the layers palette, and that is our logo. Okay, but the one thing we need to do just before that, I'm just going to undo that for a second. Okay, edit, undo. We need to put a kind of a bevel, not a bevel, but a drop shadow on the actual signature, because it's going to look very boring if we don't. So here's another thing. This is you're going through quite a lot today, actually. We need to add a style. So basically, over on the left hand side to the right hand side of where the text is there, if we double click in that blank area, this layer styles dialog box pops up. Okay, and in this case, all we're interested in is if we choose drop shadow at the bottom, it puts a tiny drop shadow on it, and I usually choose about 120 degrees, which kind of gives the effect that it's coming down from the top left. Okay, because 90% of the signatures will be in the bottom right hand corner of the picture, so it kind of makes sense that the shadow will be going down that way. Okay, and then we can increase or decrease the drop shadow on it. The distance is there, the spread and the size. So if you make the distance bigger, obviously way too big. So if you go down to spread, it kind of makes it spread out a bit. And the size then is another option. So in this case, probably 4, 8 and 4, I'd say. Yeah, 4, 4, 4, 4 and 4 is what I had it at. Okay, and it just gives a tiny bit of a drop shadow. Now if it's not a black drop shadow, if you were in here before and you were messing with it, to get it to be a black drop shadow, make sure the blend mode here is set to multiply. Okay, there's a bunch of blend modes. Just multiply, and make sure you click on that, and if it was red beforehand or something like that, click on it and just drag it down to the bottom left hand corner, so your red, green and blue all read 0, and click OK. And now it's multiply, and then the opacity, then if you want, you can bring the opacity up by dragging that up and making it more effective. Probably leave it at about 80% and click OK. So now we have a nice little drop shadow on our logo, which will help it pop out from the actual image that it's going to be popped into. So instead of having to do all that again, here's a nice little handy tip. We right click over here in this area, we have a bunch of options, and it's just off screen. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm just going to drag the layers palette over here just so you can see what's happening, because it's off screen at the capture device. Right click here, and you have an option to copy layer style, and if you click on the top piece of text, which is the copyright logo, we can right click and say paste layer style. Okay, I'm going to drag this layers palette back in until it gets right down the bottom, and you see this heavy blue line, and you let go, and now the layers palette's back where I want it. Okay, and we can just left click and drag it up there. So now we have our nice little drop shadow. Now we can get rid of the blue layer, because you can't really judge a drop shadow when it's like that. Okay, so now we can see it. So click on the blue layer, drag it to the trash. All right, so now we're actually going to get to the part where we save the signature in a specific folder on your computer. And I'd always recommend on a PC, it's in the C drive somewhere. So you make a folder called signature, or whatever you want to call it, and just leave it on the C drive. Don't have it on an external drive, because sometimes your external drive can come in as a D or an E or an F or a G or whatever, depending on how many you have. So put it on the C drive, or on a Mac. When you go into the Mac, put it on the desktop or something like that, so it's always there, and your Mac knows exactly where to get it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to save that as the signature. So JP photography. Okay, so file, save as. All right, and because it's a layered file, Photoshop wants to save it as what's called a PSD, which is a Photoshop document. Okay, and Photoshop documents keep the layered file. Okay, I'm just going to check something here now, because I'm just checking to see if anyone's still there. So I'm personally putting mine inside a folder called Workflow that's on the C drive, and I made a folder inside that and just called it Watermark. So I'm not going to call it signature this time. I'm going to call it JP photography signature, because I might have designed stuff for people, and I could have 10 or 15 of these, and if I tell a person to make a folder called C Workflow and stick it in there, at least then if I give them that file, JP photography signature, the action I make for it will look for JP photography signature. It won't look for James O'Shea photography or Mary O'Neill photography, you know. Yes, Paul, you do need a layered file. Okay, and there's a reason why you need a layered file. Thanks, Joe. You can flatten it, right? But the problem, if you flatten this image, it's going to kill it, right? And I'm going to show you why. If you flatten the image and save it as a JPEG, you don't have a transparent background anymore. So if I was to save this as a JPEG, just do a test, right? And call it JPEG instead of a PSD. And we just call it JP photography signature and click save. And click 12 for the quality. So now it looks okay, but that's not the file we saved. If we go open the file we saved and go file open, JP photography signature JPEG, and click open, it's on a white background. So if we try to drag that into an image, this white background is going to show up. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why you can't save it as a JPEG. JPEGs will flatten it, yes, but no, Andrew, you haven't missed that. You're probably one of the smart ones. You joined in later on. No, what we were doing, Andrew, earlier was just describing to people how to, when you're making a batch action, the things you have to go through in order to start finding out how wide your signature file has to be, and how you make your signature file, and certain things like that. But you haven't missed it, and you can always rewind back after it's finished. Okay, so going on from there, right? Back to, can we flatten it again? If I flatten this now, I lose access to the ability to be able to change the drop shadow effects afterwards, or to be able to change the color of the font afterwards. So I have to keep it as a layered file. okay? And I'll show you how that happens later on. So I have to keep this as a Photoshop document and a layered file. And I have to also keep that bottom layer, because the bottom layer is there for one specific reason only. It has them 4 pixels in the top left and bottom right. Top left, top right, top, bottom left, bottom right. It has them pixels in there, right? And they need to be there so that when the action moves it across and drops it down, the logo is up a little bit from the corner. Or if the action happens to be, go up to the top corner and stick it up there, the logo will be in a bit from the corner. And if you don't have that little pixel of data, it's so much more complicated to get the action to go down to the bottom and then go back up 10 pixels and across. It's an absolute pain in the neck, okay? Well, it used to be anyway. So it's just easier just putting them 4 yolks in, okay? And Andrew, if you look back on the last 20-30 minutes, you'll understand why that is, okay? So we have to save it like that. So I'll just make sure it's saved. File, save. Okay, and now we can close it. All right, so now we basically have an image. I'm just going to revert this back because I don't know if we've done stuff to this. Yes, we have. We've resized it and all, okay? So we're going to revert it back and we're going to go through what the action will do. And then we're going to go through making the action, okay? So there's an awful lot of stuff that happened. Yeah, it's exactly like a safe area in the video, Paul. Yeah, it's it's like the overscan and stuff like that. You have to keep it a safe distance in, and you can make it any size you want. It's just I found it by visually kind of drawing a marquee around the bottom corner of the image and saying around where you put the font, you can kind of see, okay, it looks kind of cool there. I might move it in a bit, might move it down a bit. Okay, but yeah, you've made a safe area where it can't go right up against the edges because that looks really unprofessional. Um, signature, yeah. JPEG files, yeah. The next thing you have to realize before we actually make this is when you're making an action that you're going to make into a batch action, the raw files are coming in at 16-bit images, right? Your JPEGs are only coming in 8-bit. Okay, a JPEG can only be an 8-bit image. If I was to get a JPEG here and just open it inside of Photoshop, sorry, you'll see that if you look at the very top there, just after the RGB, it says 8-bit, whereas the other one says 16-bit. So the raw file is 16-bit because we brought it in, we want the most amount of dynamic range. So I want to make an action that works with both 8-bit and 16-bit images. And in order to do that, I have to put a certain step in there at the end, which I'll explain at the end. And if you miss that step and there's a couple of JPEGs in the middle of your bunch of files, this action will come grinding to a halt, and you're kind of wondering, why is it coming up saying, what do you want to save it as? It's because of that particular fact. You have to convert at the last minute before you save the JPEG out. You have to convert your 16-bit image to an 8-bit image. So that's one of the other little tricky steps that you have to do, okay? So we've done that. Okay, so we're actually going to get down to the nitty-gritty of it now. So we've spent the first hour literally only making the signature. But in making the signature, we've gone through using the text tool, using the new document tool, finding out how big you need to make it, using the fit image on your original image to find out, oh, I'm shrinking it to 2004. So say if you wanted to, say you had a job and the client wanted a 3000 pixel square, or the longest edge was 3000 pixels, you would make the fit image to be 3000 pixels, but then you'd test it first and make sure, and maybe your signature would need to be bigger. So instead of it being 16-point font, it could need to be 24. So your signature file might have to be bigger for those 3000 wide images. So I'd only use these JP signature that I made. I would only use that on the files that I know are going to be 2048, which are kind of handy for Facebook and online sharing and stuff, okay? If these were on 3000 pixel wide images or 4000 pixel wide images, you would have to redesign the logo. You'd only have to do it once and just save it as JP Photography 2048, JP Photography 3000, JP Photography 4000, and then just make the action. The action that actually itself takes less than 30 seconds to make when I'm not explaining the bits that go into it, okay? So And that was just your 8-bit and 16-bit. So we'll go back to this, right? So action, we're going to actually do it now, right? So we just need to make sure that that's the original file, because that we already fit that, so we have to revert it back to the original. Now we could just close it down and reopen the same file again, but if you go file and revert, there's an option in there, it's F12 on the keyboard. It actually goes back to the way it was the last time it was saved, and because I didn't do anything with this raw file, I didn't save it out or anything when I brought it in, now my pixels are back up to 3400 and something by 4600. Okay, so it's the original file, which is what I need, because now I have to make the action. And this is a super critical point. Okay, you need to have an image open on in Photoshop before you start making the action, because if you don't, the action when you record is going to record you opening up that image. So every time you run the action, it's going to open up that image. It's not going to work on the image you want it to work on. It's going to open up the image you have just opened inside the action. So you have to have an image open before you start making the action. Okay, so this is the image we have. So the actions palette again, if we can't find it, window, actions, Alt F9, pops out. So what we need to do, so say that's not there, okay, we just need to go down to the bottom, and if you can't, if it's like button mode, so left click here on the flyout, and if it's button mode and you have a bunch of buttons like this, a lot of people, if they don't have actions in their Photoshop, will have just one called default. It'll be default actions, and there'll be maybe 8 or 9 actions that come with Photoshop. All of them are rubbish, but if you have them, just ignore them. But if it's on button mode here like this, and you can't see at the bottom, you can't see a play and a folder and all these kind of things that you need to get at, top right hand corner of the actions palette, left click on it and uncheck button mode. You'd see a correction mark beside it. Uncheck it, and then we have access to stop, record, play, new group, new action, trash can. Okay, so we need to make a new group to put the action in. So click on it, and it's a new set. Okay, so what we're going to do is, I'm just going to put that there, we just call this watermark. Obviously call it something specific so that you understand what it is. There's no point in just calling it set 1, then set 2 and set 3. So watermark, click OK. And it's basically made a new set. It's called watermark, and it's open. So now we need to make a new action to go in it. So the new action is the little second from the left hand icon. It just says create new action. It's like it used to be a new like a piece of paper with a corner up on it. Now it's just a square with a plus. So new action, you click on it, and it comes up with a dialog box, new action. All right, so what do we want to call the action? So we're going to call this JP photography. Okay, and it's inside the set called watermark. It's not inside signature, it's inside watermark. Now we can assign a function key to this if we want. So we could say have a shortcut key of if we click on say F2 and say hold down the shift key. So inside of Photoshop it would remember this, and every time I hit shift F2 it would run the action for me. You know, that's if you want to do that kind of thing. It's there if you want it. At this case, I don't want to do that, but that's there, and that's where you would go in and do it, or you can go in after the fact and do it, but this is how you do it when you're setting it up. So uncheck and say none. Color, I always kind of like the color things. So just because the actions by default are this dull gray, so if you change the color say to say yellow or something like that, or orange at least, or green, say, you would, the minute you look at it, oh, the green one's my watermark, bang. The red one would be my process, where I add contrast automatically, where I add auto levels, where I do a lot of stuff, where I do sharpening, and where it actually works, and I just hit that button, then it does that. And by having them different colors, you can differentiate them very, very quickly. Okay, so say we make the color green. So basically all we did was clicked on the new thing down here. We'll just do it again. So go back to the start. So this is how quick it would be if you're doing it without talking. New set, watermark. new action, JP photography, and give it orange as a color. Record. That's it. Okay, so now the record button is recording down the bottom. All right, so that means now anything we do inside of Photoshop, the action is going to remember it within reason. It can't, as I was saying earlier, it can't remember brush strokes and things like that. Okay, but it will remember the following things that we're going to do. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to resize the image to fit into that 2048 by 2048 size I was talking about earlier. That's because we're going to use this as a Facebook uploady kind of thing, or an online thing, where there's no point in online stuff uploading a 6000 by 4000 pixel image. It's redundantly silly. Okay, any questions on that? So as I say, if you have any questions on that or other stuff to do with this, just let me know, because I can look over and have a look. So what we're going to do now is, the action is still recording, so we're just going to go and fit the image. So when we go File, Automate, Fit Image, we're going to tell it to be 2048 pixels wide by 2048 pixels high, and click OK. So now if we look in the bottom corner, it's 2048 pixels high. So the file is the size we need it to be now, and it's also recorded it up in the actions palette. It recorded the fit image, and it's still recording. Okay, so we've done that. Now what we need to do is we need to place into the file the copyright, the actual watermark. So File and Place Embedded. Don't put in Place Linked, okay? It's a different thing altogether. Place Embedded. And what will happen is a dialog box will pop up, and it'll ask you where's the file you want to place in it, okay? So what we need to do is JP Photography Signature PSD. We want that one, okay? The reason why I'm not using a flattened version of it is because we'll have no access to changing the font, the drop shadow or anything like that after the fact. If we want to, we'd have to go back to the original file. So JP Photography PSD, click Place, puts it right bang smack in the middle. Okay, hit the Enter key, and you can see it's recorded the place action, the action of placing it right in the middle. So now what we need to do now is, this is a really big gotcha. Normally we just click on the background layer and the action would remember selecting layer called background. Now the problem is, sometimes your layer is not called background. If you brought in something, depending on how you bring it into Photoshop, you could have brought it in as a placed item. It could, or it could be just called image 1, or it could be called layer 1. And then this action won't work because it's looking for a layer called background. Okay, so there's a shortcut key to actually select the background layer. No matter what it's called, it will select the very bottom layer. Doesn't matter if it's background, if it's layer 20, whatever, it will go right to the bottom and select it. And the shortcut key for that is Alt or Option on a Mac, and the comma key, which is just to the right hand side of the M key. So Alt plus comma. So Alt, comma, and it goes to the bottom layer, and you can see it says select back layer. It doesn't say select background. It says select back layer. Okay, and that's important, right? So now what we can do now is, we need to select this layer as well. So if we hold down the Shift key, here's another thing. You see, you learn something new every day. This is going to do the wrong thing now. If I hold down Shift and click that, yeah, it's after selecting the layer called JP Photography Signature. But what if you're doing this at home and you're Michael O'Brien or Mary Fitzpatrick? It's not going to work. So what we have to do is we have to scrap what we just did and start again, okay? And I'll show you how to fix it. So click Stop, and we can go back up to JP Photography and just dump that. So we still have our watermark folder, okay, and we can dump this one. Well, actually, with this particular file, what we'll do is click on the file and go File, Revert, and it brings it back to the way it was when we first brought it in, okay? Things like that happen, and it's really good that it happened right in the middle of doing this, because it kind of shows that, you know, my brain is still working, and oh god, this is how you fix this. So what we're going to do is go back again. So we have made our, clicking on the new set, we've made one called Watermark, and we click on New Action. We call it JP Photography, okay? Right, so we're going to record it again. So it's recording now. All we do is fit image. So automate, fit image, 2048 by 2048, because remember the last time. Click OK. Recorded the fit image dialog. Now we need to record the place. So File, Place Embedded, JP Photography Signature. Or in Mary Jones' case, Mary Joan Signature. Okay? Whatever you call the file, this is the layered file that you're selecting and clicking on Place. Now, hit the Enter key and it says Place. Now, here's where you counteract what would have happened. Over here where it says JP Photography Signature, on Mary's one it would say Mary's. But if you double click the name, you can call it Signature. And it remembered that being called Signature. So now it'll work on any other one you make. Okay? So we need to select the background layer. So go Alt, comma, and it selects back layer. Then hold down the Shift key and select the signature layer. So hold down Shift and left click on the signature layer, and it selected the two layers. Alright, and then if we click on the move tool in the top corner, alright, you get these options here for aligning everything. If you can't see them, you will see them, but if you can't see them, they're in the layer align options. Okay, so we need to align bottom edge. You can see it pop to the bottom, and then layer align right edge. Okay, so from there, I'm just checking. I'm after copying. There's another error. Oh, isn't this lovely? Right, so third error I just found, okay, was the fact that it would place the named file in there and not just a layer called signature. Alright, so sorry about this. We're going to start again. We're going to dump, stop it and dump it, and click on this and revert. So we need to rename, you need to open back up that signature file. So if we go File, Open, and find the JP Photography Signature, okay, we just open it. We're just going to call it Signature. So no matter what, as long as if you were following this at home, if you just call the actual file Signature, it'll work. Okay, File, Save As, and just call it signature.psd. This is where, and click yes to replace that. This is where actions can have a really gotcha, because it's okay for making an action for me for my computer, but then if I wanted to use that action on Mick's computer, that can really mess up if Mick has a different name. So most sorry about this. So basically back to the start again. We'll get rid of Watermark as well. So Actions palette, create a new set by clicking on the folder, call it Watermark, create a new action, call it Signature. Okay, now it's recording. So yet again, File, automate, fit image, 2048 by 2048. Click OK. Place the signature this time. File, place embedded, signature PSD, place, and hit enter. And if you open up that really quick, you see it placed signature PSD. That's the gotcha that would have had you emailing me back saying it didn't work, because my one that I was doing had JP photography and your one could be JC photography. You could have named it wrong. So as long as you name it signature and follow along, it will work. So, still recording, happy days. So I need to select the back layer, not the background. So to do that, Alt, comma, select layer back, which is what we want. Hold down the Shift key and left click on the signature layer. And that also selects the two layers, the signature layer as well. And when we do that, when we have two layers or more selected, with the move tool selected in the top left hand corner, you can see align left, center and right, and top, middle and bottom. So I can just click align right and align bottom. Alright. And if we really quickly zoomed in, you see the way it's in a bit from the corner. It doesn't matter where I aligned it to, because of those little pixels that were there, it keeps it in a safe distance, okay? So that's the two of them, right? So now what we need to do is, this is where at the minute that's a 16-bit image, and I would encourage you to do, the first time you're trying to make this action, do it on a raw file that's in 16-bit, because you haven't, if you open up a JPEG and try and do it and make the action out of it, it won't give you this next option and you'll be kind of stuck. So open up a raw file as a 16-bit image, try the action, record it, and then you can make this next step, which means that it works with raw files and JPEGs. So image mode 8-bit, okay, and by clicking on that it converts it from 16-bit to 8-bit, because you're going to save it as a JPEG anyway. And if you didn't do that, the action when you're trying to do a batch process will come up with an absolute fit. It'll just stop and it'll keep saying, where do you want to save it, where do you want to save it, because it saves it as a copy because it's a 16-bit image. So that's that. And then bang 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 bang, yeah, all you do then is layer, flatten image, and then here's the part where you can have it save it out. Okay, file, save as. And I'd also encourage you to have a folder on your C drive where you save all the images to. So save all your Facebook images or whatever, Facebook signature images, to a folder called Facebook signature images. So inside of here I have a folder called Facebook signature images. I just made it beforehand, and I'm going to click it and I'm going to tell it to save, and save as type JPEG, and tell it to save it in there, and click save, and obviously save it at quality 12, and it's remembered that. And the last thing you need to do is to actually close the file, close, and that's the action done, and click stop. Alright, so all of those gotchas and little things that happened along the way are all kind of learning moments, that things that might happen when you were trying to do it. And all it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 little items, okay? But I could do that now without doing anything else. I could make that in like 30 seconds, right? So to test it, what you do is this. So if we go and have a look at that particular folder, Facebook signature images, we can see it's in there. The size is 2048 by 2048, or sorry, 2048 high. So it's resized properly. The signature went in, nice and happy in the corner. Happy days. Okay? And it's a JPEG. So we can delete that, hit the delete key, and go back now and just try another image and see if it works with the other image. So we'll open up, say, this image, which is a JPEG. It's not a raw file, it's a JPEG. So right click and open from Bridge, and it comes back in. Any questions, by the way? So there's our image there. Okay. So to make this work, you can leave it like this, but it's very messy. So click on, you can leave it like that and just select the little chevron there to close it up. It's kind of like the Explorer. Everything kind of works, and it goes, you know, it goes like that. So you can close it up and have signature. You could just click on the play button there, and it would play the action. But it's not as intuitive. So if you go to the flyout menu and say button mode, all I have to do is click on signature, and it's done. Okay, so I go to my Bridge here, and I go to the signature images, and it's in there. Okay, but we made a mistake. See the size of the, yeah, we did make a mistake. There's one thing I forgot to do. Okay, and I love that it actually happened, because it shows basically what can happen. And I just open up the other image, because the other image is a 16-bit image. So if we open up this one, or even this one, it's still a raw file. Okay, this is, yeah, this is exactly what would have happened if you would have tried this. And it happened to me earlier on today, because you have to think of all these ifs, if, buts, and whys. So we're just going to open up that image as a 16-bit image. Okay, I'm just going to click on the signature action. I'm going to go find where I put it, which is inside the Facebook signature images. Should be in there somewhere. There. Okay, I'm just going to open that up. I made another mistake. Okay. Right, I made another mistake. The first mistake was this. You see the size of the JP, the logo, and you see the size of it there. It's completely different. Okay, that was my first mistake. Now the second mistake was this. I said file save JPEG, not save as. And when you say file save JPEG, this happens. It physically saved the JPEG as _1290801 JPEG. So every time I run the action, it's going to save over that file name. So it made a mistake. Okay? So, yet again, what we're going to do is dump the action, close the photo. We're going to do it from scratch, but I won't explain it as much now. I'll only explain the new bits we're adding on. This is actually really good that this happened, because these are the kind of things that happen that are problem solving. And by having them happen now means they won't happen when you try it later. So go back to Bridge. We'll open up, delete that, and we'll go back to our images. Right, so we'll open up the raw file. Yeah, 2 or 3 things happened there, but sure, we'll get there. Yes, open image. Okay, right. So the thing that happened with the graphic, the signature being bigger on one and smaller on the other, was because the JPEGs are coming in at 180 dots per inch, and the raw files are coming in at 300 dots per inch. So you have to inbuilt into the action, you have to make sure that the actual resizes them to 300 dots per inch, okay? So I'm just going to check to see if I can do it this way easily. Image size 300. Right, this should work with this. We might have to... Yeah. So we have a raw file. So we're going to make the action yet again. So new set, watermark. Right? New action, signature. It's recording. First thing is this. We need to fit the image, automate, fit image. 2048 by 2048, okay? And it recorded that. Now this is the thing that I'm hoping it will work on the raw file, that I don't have to jerry-rig an action back in again. If we go to image and image size, it is correctly sized to 300 pixels per inch, okay? But I'm just hoping that by typing in 300 pixels per inch and clicking on OK, no, it didn't remember that. You see that? Okay, so what are we going to do here? Okay, I'm going to stop that. It's going to be one of them days, folks. So I'm going to bring in the raw file again, but this time we're going to bring it in at... Oh no, we can do this. We can do it. We just bring it in as it is. Yeah, I know how we can do this. So the raw file's there, and it's a 16-bit image. So we're going to create the action, okay? Call it watermark. I had all this written down, but there was I'm basically not looking at my notes, and I'm paying for it big time here. So watermark, and then new action, call it signature. So it's recording now. So automate, fit image, 2048 by 2048. All right. Now, because that's already in at 300 dots per inch, okay, I need to change it to say 299 dots per inch, and then change it back to 300. And when my JPEGs come in under the action, they'll go from 180 to 299 to 300 in a split second. It won't do anything to the actual quality of the image. It will not make pixels or soften it in any way, but it's forcing the JPEGs to come in and be resized to 300 dots per inch. They're not getting resized, it's only the dots per inch that are getting resized. So image, image size, and as long as we don't have, see the way that's 1536 by 2048, if I change that to 299, it's still the same pixel dimensions. I haven't created any pixels. I've just changed the print size by ever so slightly, and I click OK, and now it's remembered that. And then I go back in again, and I go image, image size, and I go back down and say 300 and click OK. Now it's remembered, and when I bring my JPEG in at 180, because some JPEGs come off of cameras at 72 dots per inch, they can be 60, 70 inches wide, but they're only printing at 72, so it's useless anyway. So you have to convert them to 300 dots per inch, and then they will print at like 12 by 16 or whatever the standard is for, say, a 24 meg camera. Okay, Pat, how are you doing? Yeah, yes, Pat. Sorry. Say raw files. You have to click open file and camera raw. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just right click and say open file and camera raw, and it should work for you. If it doesn't work for you, give me a shout tomorrow, and I'll do a remote login and show you how to do it. All right. Give me a shout if it does work for you there. Just click just tell me on the feed there. So sorry about that. So we've got our image to 300 dots per inch now. So now we need to place. Okay. Place embedded. So we're placing in our watermark. So we need to go find where the watermark is. So we saved it in a folder called Watermark and we called it Signature, and click place and hit enter. So that recorded placing in a file called Signature. Okay, so now we have to select the back layer, which is Alt, comma, selects the back layer, the bottom one. So, because sometimes it might not be called background, and then hold down the Shift key and click on Signature, and that selects Signature, because in this case, as long as the file is called Signature, we're okay. Okay. If you wanted to make sure it was working perfectly before we selected the background, you would rename it Signature, and it would rename it. Okay. So once again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrap it again. I'm going to start from scratch, because these are all little tweaks that you need to know. Okay. So I'm going to revert the picture, and we're back to scratch. All right. So 15 times a charm, I think, is an Irish colloquialism. Yes, Andrew. The reason why I'm doing it this way is, yes, you can make a brush out of your watermark and just drop it in there, but by showing people how to make an action, they can then make an action that puts on contrast onto the image, that changes some of the color in the image, that color corrects it, that puts in sharpness, that maybe makes it a black and white. It's making an action rather than just, you know, converting your signature to a brush and just plomping it in. And it's been able to do it over massive amounts. So it's more not just the signature thing, it's been able to work on all your images. Say you had a wedding to do and you could batch process all the images. Okay, but this is all the little things that will happen when you're trying to make an action that kind of trip you up. So that's why I kind of went this way about it rather than just making a brush. A brush is a lot simpler. Might do it in a couple of the maybe 3 or 4 ones down the line, because I think the next one I want to do is actually a basic kind of introduction to using speed lights with cameras and getting them off the camera and stuff like that. I just have to figure out how I'm going to show it all inside in the cabin that I'm in. So that's probably going to be Tuesday nights. But that's why I wouldn't have gone about it by just making a brush out of Watermark. Yes, you can do that, and it's a lot easier. But by doing it this way, it shows people that they can make an action and batch process stuff, and also then it shows them how actions are more powerful than just by doing the brush, which is a lot quicker, but it's the actionable thing. So we have our image again, so sorry about that. We made a folder called Watermark, new, signature, and it records. Right, so we have a new signature. We're recording now. So first thing, fit. So automate fit image, 2048 square, resizes it to fit. Next thing now is we have to trick it into resizing the JPEGs when we're bringing it in. So edit, go across the image, down to image size, and change that 300 to 299 pixels per inch, and just make sure resample is unchecked. Okay, make sure that's unchecked. The only thing you're changing is the resolution to 299. Then go back in again, image size, and change it back to 300. Now it's remembered that. Okay, so now from there, yeah, so from that size there, what we need to do now is place the signature, place embedded. So file, place embedded, find a folder that will never change from this day forward, and it's on your C drive, and click on the signature PSD, place it, and hit enter. And then when you're on that layer, just double click and rename it as Watermark, so that the action remembers that. Now to select the bottom layer, Alt, comma, and then hold down Shift and left click on the Watermark layer. Okay, and it's selected them all. And now when we have 2 layers or more selected, with the move tool selected, you'll have these icons at the top of the screen. If you don't have the move tool selected, you can just go to layer, align, and go bottom edges, and then layer, align, right edges. Okay? And you can see it's moved in a bit because of those 4 dots that we had. So we're almost there. So the next thing then is to flatten the image. Actually, no, the next thing what we'll do is we'll convert it from 8-bit to 16-bit. Because at the minute, sorry, we'll convert it from 16 to 8. So it's 16-bit at the minute. We need it at 8. So image mode 8-bit. Perfect. Then image, go across the layer, flatten image. Now it's flat. And then the final thing is file, save as. That's where I made the mistake before. I only clicked file save. So save as, and then we tell it where we want to save it. Facebook signature images. Wherever your saved Facebook images will be, this is where you tell it to save it. And it saves it as a JPEG. And click save. And OK. Alright. And then file, close. And then click stop. And if we look at save now, this is crucial. It doesn't have a name in there. It just says save as a JPEG quality 12 in that folder. Because I said save as, not save. Okay? So now the action will work on any image you chuck at it. So we're almost there, folks. So 2 hours, not too bad. So literally that bit there took about a minute to do, but all of the explanations beforehand and all of the trips and the little hiccups that you can have along the way that I kind of came across and put in and basically messed up on when I was doing them, because I knew how to fix them, I could show you how to fix them. And it's better that it happen now than afterwards when you're trying to tomorrow or the next day pulling your hair out trying to get it to work. Okay, so we stopped the action and now we have the action ready. So we can go back to the flyout menu inside the actions palette and click button mode, and now we have a button. So in theory now, if we get this raw file, that's a DNG file, that's a JPEG, and that's a JPEG. Okay, we're going to open up the 4 images because I just want to check that it's going to work. So we click open image there. And 1, 2, 3. View. 3 images. Why is only 3 images open? Oh, Larry. Okay. So, which images? Yeah, it's the bridge one. For some reason, the bridge one didn't open. So, open. Now, so we have 4 images, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how the signature will work at one at a time if we just had a bunch of images on the screen. So all you do is click signature, 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 signature. Okay? And if we go into the folder where they're saved, we now have the signature on a portrait that was a raw file, on a landscape raw file, a portrait JPEG, and a landscape JPEG. So they're all JPEGs now, but most importantly, the signature is the same size in every single one of them, and it just works. Okay? So that being that, any questions? Okay, I just put up any questions, right? So, say you didn't want to click, okay? Or, here's another one. Say you had an image where you wanted a black signature with a white. Okay, so you wanted to create a slightly different action, okay? So instead of being white text with a black droplet on it. So what we can do is this. If we go back to the actions palette and click on the flyout menu and click button mode. if we now open up the watermark folder and open up the signature action and go right to the bottom and uncheck those two options, okay, then when we try this now in a second, it will not save it and close it. It will leave it open because I want to mess with this. I want to try something. So we go back to the raw file again, open it in our opening camera raw, and open. So I'm just going to press signature up here and click play. It goes through everything but leaves it open. Okay, right. Now here's the reason, Paul, earlier why I said if you flatten the thing, you lose the ability to invert, to mess with this. If I just go edit, undo, flatten image, I now have the watermark layer visible, and it's a smart object because I placed it. And because I placed it, if I double click that little icon, it comes up with the original PSD, and I can now change the effects. So if I did want to change something in here, I could change it in here, okay? And you close that and click no because I don't want to change it that way. But what I can do is this. I can just select the watermark layer and go image, adjustment, invert, and now I have a black signature with a white drop shadow. No bothers, Joe. I know it's fair. Yeah. Have a good one, and I'll be on probably what they say. I'll be on Tuesday night, talking hopefully about flash and onboard flash, and not onboard flash, but using speedlights with cameras and getting them off camera and using triggers and things like that. It won't be any Photoshop. So there's our inverted one. So what I want to do now is I want to make another action that's got that reverse bit in it, but I don't want to bother my Barney redoing everything again, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to do that. Okay, so revert that. So by going file and revert, it goes back. So we have our original image open, and remembering that we unchecked the save and the close here, the signature, if I select, making sure I'm not in button mode here, and go back to the standard one, and I open up the watermark folder and I have signature. If I click on signature and I drag it down to the new action button, it makes a copy of the whole thing. And if I double click on the signature copy and just rename it signature invert, okay, I can now play the action but inverted at the last second. So I need to switch off where it says flatten image here. I need to check that little checkbox to switch off the flattening. So I just click on play, it runs through it. I have my two layers there. Okay, so it stopped right at this point, and this is, Paul, what you were saying about earlier, is can I continue on at another point doing another bit of the action, and this is how you would do it. Okay, so the last thing that got played was convert. It converted it from 16-bit to 8-bit. So clicking on the convert mode here, which is the last thing, and then I can click record. And if I go, because I need to select the watermark layer now, I'm going to click on watermark, and it's recorded that I select layer watermark. Now, image, adjustments, invert. It's inverted it for me. Okay? And then I just click stop. And what I do then is I just turn back on the flatten image. For the minute, I just turn that back on because I don't want to save and close it yet, because I want to just make sure it works. So that image that's open, I want to revert it back. So file, revert. So I have my original image again. Double clicking the hand tool is a handy tip. It kind of puts the picture as big as it can on the screen, okay? So, signature invert. I select that now and just click play. And it's working perfect. Look. I have my inverted signature. So now I have a white signature with a black shadow, and I have a black signature with a white shadow. Because sometimes you might be doing high key stuff in a studio and you want a black signature in the corner. Okay? Sometimes you could be doing low key stuff like this where the other way around was better. Okay? So now I have two options. But the second one was really quick. I just need to know what to do to get in there, and I just showed you that, okay? Yeah, no problems, Pat. Give me a shout tomorrow. Message me, Pat, tomorrow anytime, because unfortunately, because of what's going on, I'm kind of twiddling my thumbs. Yeah, and I'll go through it with you, and I'll do a remote session with you if you want. All right, Pat. So the last bit then is just what we're going to do now is we're going to switch back on the save and close on the two of them, because we want to make an action, a droplet, and we want to show you how. I want to show you 2 or 3 different ways of doing this that we can batch process a couple of hundred images and not have to sit in front of the computer. Okay, so basically we can make sure that it's save and close is checked and save and close is checked, and I'll click okay, and we can close them like that. So the first one I want to do is the signature one. So if you select that action there, there's 3 different ways you can make this. You can make what's called a droplet, which basically is, I'm just going to show you here. I'm just going to move the Photoshop out of the way. That little icon there, that's right beside where Photoshop is, that's called a droplet. And what you can do with a droplet is you can select images in Bridge or in File Explorer or in Finder and just drag them directly onto that droplet, and the droplet will run the action and batch process the images, and as long as the action has told it to save it somewhere, then you just go to that folder and everything's done for you. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. That's the best way if it works. Sometimes it can be a bit buggy depending on which version of Photoshop and Bridge you have together. Okay, so I'm just going to move this back out a little bit here. So we're getting to the nitty gritty of it now, right? Yeah. So what we do is select signature. Okay. Now I'm just going to check here. I'm going to go to the folder where everything was saved, and I'm going to select all of those ones there and delete them because I don't want to keep them, because that's my Facebook upload folder with my signatures on it. And I'm going to go back by clicking on the back button there. You'll see it over here. Just click on the back button and it goes back to the folder that you were just in. So these are my images that I want to process. I have 14, I think. I have 10 of them. Okay, I have a couple of square ones. I have a high res. That particular one there is 7,300 pixels wide. It was a stitch that I did. They're not great pictures, but they're all different pictures, different resolutions, square, portrait, landscape, and RAWs and JPEGs. There's a bunch of everything in there. Okay, I'm going to select them all. You select them all in Bridge by doing this. You can do it a couple of different ways. Click on the first one, scroll all the way down to the bottom, hold down the shift key, click on the last one. That selects them all. Second way of doing it, click on any one of them and press Control or Command A, and it will select them all. So that's another way. Or say you only wanted to work on 4 of them, you could click on that one. I want to work on that. Scroll down a bit and hold down Command or Control, left click on that one, selects them non-consecutively, and Control click or Command click on this one and Command click on this one, Control click. Okay, so by holding Control down you can select on individual images in a folder, or Control A selects them all. In this case I want to select them all. Now that I've done that, I can now harness the power of that signature action and actually just sit back and have a drink for 10 seconds. There's 2 ways about doing it. Okay, first way is, I'm just going to move this over here. Inside of Bridge, if you have Bridge and it's hooked up correctly to Photoshop, sometimes it might not be depending on how it was installed. In the tools menu from in Bridge, you'll have a Photoshop option, okay? And from there you can choose batch. If you don't have that option, you go into Photoshop and go File, Automate, Batch. And it comes up with the same dialog box, okay? Now, I'll go back to the Bridge one in a second, but here's the gotcha. If the Bridge one doesn't work with the Photoshop Tools option, when you're in the Batch dialog box from Photoshop that you got through from Photoshop here, your source folder here, your source, has to be Bridge, okay? You see where that Bridge isn't selected there? It can get very, very finicky. It was doing the same thing earlier on with me, and now it wasn't working. You know what I mean? It's kind of an absolute pain in the rear end. But I'm just going to close Bridge for a second and reopen up Bridge, and hopefully that'll kick it in its teeth. So select the images, Control A, and try it from inside of File, Automate, Batch from Photoshop. And hopefully now, no, we don't have Bridge, okay? So it's going to be a bit of a pain in my banana. So what we're going to do is, we're going to do it from, we're going to close down Photoshop, and we're going to reopen Photoshop. What I'm trying to do here is, folks, I'm trying to force the two of these to work together. This is a slightly awkward option, but it's one of them ones that it might be the only option you have, because it's kind of like not everything is all, you know, rosy and gold in making actions and things like that. So I've opened up Photoshop after Bridge, so hopefully now I go Photoshop, Automate, Batch. I still don't have access to Bridge. Okay, so signature, go Watermark, signature, folder. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do it from Bridge. So from Bridge, Tools, Photoshop, Batch. Alright, comes up with this dialog box. It's always the same options. Because we selected the signature watermark from over here, inside the watermark folder, the set, the set is already set. We have to just choose watermark and then action signature, because I messed with it earlier. Normally when you click on that, it automatically selects it here. Then the next three options are check number 2, number 3, and number 4. Leave the first one unchecked and select those three. Click stop for errors, select that, and just click in the destination over here. Usually says none. Do save and close. That's it. So cancel that and I'll show you. With signature selected there, because this is the one we want. Signature. Go out to Bridge and choose Tools, Photoshop, Batch. And the set, watermark, and signature actions are already selected. The source is Bridge. Now it's working. See that? Isn't that an absolute pain in the banana? Anyway, so now it's working. Because, oh, I'm telling you, it's Photoshop. The source is Bridge. You could use a source as a folder and then point it to wherever you saved your images. So if you have a pre-processed bunch of images that you want, or a processed bunch of images you want to put a signature on, if they're saved in a specific folder, you can just point that source dialog box to a folder and say choose this folder, and happy days. In this case we want it to be Bridge. We want the files to be the ones we selected in Bridge. Source Bridge. And the second, third and fourth options here, check them, and where it says errors, just click stop for errors, and up the top says save and close. And when you do that and you click OK, what's happening is Photoshop is opening each image, putting the signature in it, saving it in the other folder, and opening the next image, and I'm not doing a thing. And this is such an incredibly powerful tool that simple little signature action there can save an awful lot of time. So if I go back to Bridge now, they were my original files. So if I go to where I told Photoshop to save the files with the signature, I now have all my files here with the signature in them perfectly. Okay? That's how powerful it is. Alright? So, in all fairness, to do that action, if I didn't explain it, would have took less than a minute, and then to create the thing there, 15 seconds. And it could do 10,000 images, and you could just leave them sitting there. So I want to save all of these, delete them, or sorry, I want to select them all and delete them. So, and then go back to, by clicking the back button in the top there, the original files again. I'm going to select them all again. Alright, and I'm going to choose the inverted one this time. So if we go to Photoshop and choose signature invert this time, I want to see if we can go in there now that the two of them are talking to each other, and go File, Automate, Batch, and where the source is, no, they're still not talking. Okay, so the other way we can do this then is we can actually create what's called a droplet, that little downward facing arrow, which is the most powerful thing that you can do with these actions. Okay, it means you don't have to go in and do that batch action thing, which can be time consuming enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a droplet now from the, say, the first one again, the signature one. Okay, so we click on the signature watermark. Inside here we click on it and make sure it's selected, and then say File, Automate, Create Droplet. Comes up with the same dialog box again, but it says Save Droplet In. So I'll choose, and I want to save the droplet in my desktop, and I just call it Signature White, SIG White. Okay, or you can call it Watermark. I just call it Sig White. I was testing it earlier, and click Save there. And Sig White already exists. Do you want to replace it? Yes, that's fine. Now, these are the things to make sure. Make sure set is Watermark, because it'll have whatever other actions you have on your system, they'll be here. But because we pre-selected signature inside of Watermark, it should already say Watermark as the set folder and action is signature. And then we just keep those three checked, stop for errors, save and close, and we click OK. And what's happened is it's actually put a little droplet on the desktop. I'm just going to show you now. I'm just going to drag Photoshop over a little bit, and there's my little droplet. I'm going to drag Photoshop over another little bit more. So there's my droplet. Okay, so if I get Bridge now, and just to show you, I'm go to my signature images that I did. So if I get, yeah, I'm going down to my Facebook signature images there, just here. So there's nothing in there. Okay, so I now go back to my images to process, select the first one, shift click, select the last one. I can now drag them out and on top of the droplet, and when you see the droplet kind of getting a shade on it there, just let it go. And you see that droplet couldn't communicate with Photoshop. That sometimes happens, right? What's happening there, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. Okay, I have AVG antivirus selected, okay, and anytime I drop something like that onto the desktop, it comes up with a little kind of a thing saying, oh, this could be a problem, please wait till I scan it. So I have to click abort, and I have to, it kind of learns that it's not a problem, and I just double click, yeah. So now if I drag them across this time, because the AVG antivirus scanner, and I just minimize this, They're working in the background. Because I told AVG, no, this is not a problem. Let it do its thing. Then that's it. I'm done. I'm finished. I can be sitting here drinking a cup of tea. Go walk the dog or whatever. 10,000 images, the same thing. So I go back to Bridge again, and I go down to my images in the signature folder, and these are already 2048 by 2048. Give me 1 second there, and just drag this up here out of the way. Yeah, you can see they're 2048 by 1536, and the signatures on each one of them. So they're 2048 on the longest edge, and the signature is perfect on each one. And how you, Dave? So using your droplet, I can open Explorer and drop the folder into droplets without having to start up Photoshop, or do you still need to open Photoshop first? Sometimes Photoshop, it will work, but it depends on, yes, you can drop them from Explorer. You can just drop them straight onto your droplet. But it's better to have Photoshop open first, because if you have, in my case, I have two versions of Photoshop. I have Photoshop 2020 and I have Photoshop 2018. And for the tutorials and all this kind of stuff, I'm using Photoshop 2020 because it's the latest version that mostly everybody would have. And my older version has like 9,000 actions in there, and it's more easier to see what I'm doing. So I could close down Photoshop and just drag them in, but it depends on which is your default Photoshop. So you're better off just opening up Photoshop first. And yeah, there is a lot of info there, Michael. Yeah. It depends on if you want to open up Photoshop first. I would open Photoshop up first like I am there now, so at least it's open in the background. And then there's less hassle of it, because it still has to open. Photoshop will still have to open to actually process the images, right, David? But I could go to Explorer here. So I'm in Explorer now. So if I found my signature images there that had the signature on them, just deleted them, and I go now, and from within Bridge, if I go to my images to process and I say open that in Explorer, it'll open it in Explorer. There's my images there. I have Windows 7, by the way. It's not Windows 10, so my raw files don't have a preview. So I could select them 10 images there, drag them directly onto the droplet, and it's working away, So as long as it was to get to the point where I'm now sitting back saying, God almighty, there's 2 hours 20 minutes, right? I think that we came across all the problems, and I'm delighted it actually happened. All the problems that you might come across while creating that same action, we came across them when we were doing it, and we fixed them. So that if you try and create, and no problems, John. If you try and create something like that, I could have just said here, and known all of them things beforehand. And if you miss one of them, or if you do something slightly different, or if you named your file, say John Corliss photography, and I had been talking about JP photography, then the action wouldn't work. It'd grind to a halt, and it'd come up with an error. Cannot find John Corliss JP photography, because you saved your signature as a different name. So by going through everything again, yeah, you did pick up a lot, Rob. Yeah. But give me a shout. Like I'm there. I'm the email at the start, and I'll put it up at the just looking at the reception there now. The speed's a bit canny. Yeah. So by going through everything again, it only takes a couple of seconds to get to actually make the action once you're used to making an action like that. But I kind of had to cover an enormous amount of stuff to be able to. Thanks, Mary. I don't know about that now. To be able to get to where we got to, and all the little pitfalls that would happen, that people constantly kind of give me a shout back saying this happened or this happened or this happened, and I know in my own head it happened because of this reason, and it's great that it actually happened live there. And they were all the reasons why if you don't put the four little dots in the corner, then when you move over it's right down the very bottom of the image, and it looks really unprofessional. So little things like that can help. You might have already got, as I said, there is other ways of doing it. Andrew was pointing out you could just make a brush out of it and just plop it in and it's done. But this, by creating an action like this, means that I can create an action that does a hell of a lot of stuff with my images, um, and have it batchable, and it's not just like a signature that just plops the brush in and we're done, you know what I mean? So that's why I kind of went about it this way. So listen, um, anyone that's still left, thanks a million. I don't know how many still left, but hopefully everyone had a good time. And what I'm going to do is on Monday night, what day is today? This is Sunday. On Tuesday night, about 8 o'clock, we're going to do another one. And I'm going to see if I can, I have to use a couple of iPhones. I'm going to see if I can set up a little kind of a table in here where I can actually have a speedlight flash in my camera on the table and go through how to do little, thanks Paul, how to do little things with your speed light, set it up, maybe things like that. It'd be a Godox speed light. If that doesn't materialize, I'll do something else on Photoshop. I'll put up a link tomorrow, um one of them live preview links. So if you just subscribe to this channel, you'll probably see the live link anyway. And what I'll probably do is anybody that's there, I'll send them out another link and I'll post something up on my Facebook page. So I think I'm going to sign off, and thanks. Actually, you've no idea. I have absolutely no idea how I hold it all in either. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks, David. Yeah, yeah. Well, as I say, on David, what I'll do in about a week's time, the Tuesday thing will be just speed, lights, and flash, because I want to do a bit of everything. I don't want to just all be, because I do a lot of everything on my own when I'm teaching people and stuff. It's not all Photoshop. It can be portrait posing and lighting and stuff like that, and it's all the tech end of it and the modifiers and stuff and posing people and stuff. I'll probably do one where we show an action now that we've got that hard sort of one out of the way. How are you, Jared? How's it going? Were you here from the start, Jared? Uh, Now that we got that out of the way, what I'll probably do is I'll do an action maybe in 4 or 5 episodes, which would be about a week and a half, where we actually put a little bit of contrast on an image, and we, maybe do a tiny bit of stuff with it, so that, as I was saying for David there, you can do your, go out, shoot your wedding, come back and batch process everything, and not have to be sitting in front of the computer, basically wanging slide bars around, because that's what drives me crackers about Photoshop, especially the camera raw, is there's so many slide bars. People sit there wanging a slide bar looking at the image, and after 15 or 20 minutes they might be happy, but then they pick up a phone call and or go and answer the door and come back and they look at the picture and they go, ah! It's like they've completely messed up the image. But because our eyes visually change and alter what we see and neutralize stuff that we're doing, we can be putting so much color in or contrast or something like that, and we get used to it. And because we're wanging slide bars on the same image for 20 minutes, we end up with something that looks ridiculous looking, and we don't see it until we look away and reset our eyes for a couple of seconds. So yeah, no problem, John, at all. Lightroom and Photoshop, mainly use Lightroom, yeah. Lightroom is fine, John. It's just, for me, I call it tragic room. It's so bloated, and for me, Bridge does what I do. Lightroom is great, but I just like Bridge because it's simple. It does what I need it to do, and it works like really, really, really fast. And if there's no what you call libraries to lose in Lightroom or get corrupted, or I just have my Bridge and it does what it does. Um, so I think, yeah, that's about it. Anyone, any last questions or anything they want to see actually covered? Because I have a bit of I have a good few things from different people, from different photographers and stuff like that. Stuff they want to see kind of covered, in as much as I can cover it. So if anyone wants to see that and covered, they can always leave a comment, and I'll have a look in a few minutes anyway. And other than that, sure, I'm going to sign off, and I'll see you, what day is it? I'll see you Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. Thanks a million, folks.